Before there was Dobby Vanity, before there was Onision, before there was R. Kelly, there was Kim Fowley. With The Runaways, a film about the 70s all-female rock band of the same name, finally making its appearance on Netflix after 10 years, I wanted to take a few moments to explain why I don't think this band's experiences should be glamorized or romanticized. Most of this information isn't exactly new, though not all of it, and we'll get to that, but it's information that is 5 years old, or thereabout, and information younger people watching the film probably wouldn't know. I was about 14 years old when I watched the Runaways movie for the first time, the same year I started playing in bands. At that age, watching that movie, I thought there wasn't anything in the world cooler or more inspiring than the Runaways' story. I watched live videos and interviews, I read Cherie Currie's book, I saw Joan Jett at the California State Fair one year, and when she played a couple Runaways songs, I absolutely lost my mind. I really looked up to them. However, sometime in 2015, that all changed. In 2015, Runaways bass player Jackie Fox came out and alleged that the band's producer, Kim Fowley, had raped her at a party after a show, with other people in the room, including other members of the Runaways. They were all about 16 years old, with Fowley being, a full-grown adult. Now, I'm not here to fault any members of the band just for being in the room, or anybody for being in the room for that matter. My goal here is to simply bring to light some of the less than stellar responses given to Jackie's story. So what I'm going to do is just read what I find to be the most relevant chunks of the original article where Jackie came out about the abuse, then get into Cherie's now deleted public response on her Facebook, then debunk some of Cherie's claims with footage from a TV interview Jackie did after the article came out. I will also show clips of the TV interview while reading the article if I find them to be relevant or add context. Basically, this whole video will be me organizing and regurgitating information for the uninitiated. Grab a coffee, grab a snack, grab something to smoke if you're over 18, because this whole story is a doozy. One night in the spring of 1975, Rodney Bingenheimer, a notorious hanger-on and the unofficial mayor of the Sunset Strip, caught sight of Jackie and her friends on the dance floor at the Starwood. He'd been going around the room asking every girl whether she played an instrument. Jackie didn't stand out, she was just next. Jackie told him she played guitar, but when he wanted to know how old she was, she hesitated. Why would anybody be interested in a 15-year-old musician, she thought to herself. When she finally fessed up, Bingenheimer squealed, "Oh, you're perfect!" He told her there was this producer she had to meet right now in an apartment a short drive away who was putting together an all-girl rock band. Maybe she'd like to be a part of it? Jackie had no idea what to say. She was giddy. She was dubious. She took along 2 friends as a precaution. It was around 9 p.m. when they knocked on the door to Kim Fowley's apartment, known as the Dog Palace. Immediately, Jackie saw that this was not some gilded pad of a record mogul. Spare change and scraps of paper scrawled with song lyrics carpeted the floor. Pill bottles covered a chest of drawers. But Fowley was unashamed. He took one look at Jackie and went straight into stream of consciousness pitch about his vision for her in the band. He spoke rapid fire, his arms in a blur, his fingers poking in the air. "When the band is out together," Fowley said, "they'll wear heels, and you won't, so you'll all be the same height. It'll be a battle," Fowley continued, "a battle between you and the drummer over who's going to be the leader of the band." He paused before making it clear that there was a good chance that the drummer would beat her up. No one listening to Fowley at that moment could have predicted that the band he was describing, the Runaways, would have a lasting influence on pop culture and on feminism, that it would launch the careers of metal icon Lita Ford and rock and roll Hall of Famer Joan Jett, or that it would inspire the Riot Grrrl movement of the early 90s, or that Kristen Stewart would later star in a biopic about the band. All Jackie knew on her first night at the Dog Palace was that she wanted in. After rejecting Jackie as lead guitarist, Fowley asked if she could play bass. She never had, but told him she would give it a try. The audition was the next day. She took 3 buses to get to the mobile home that served as the Runaways' rehearsal space. There was old carpet on the floor and a shoddy PA system that never worked well enough to let anyone actually hear the vocals. Relatable. Jackie plugged in and awkwardly started to pluck at her borrowed bass. The other girls sensed she was a novice and didn't like that she played with a pick, but Fowley told them that if they didn't hire her, they'd have to cancel shows he had lined up. It would cost him money. One by one, the other band members, singer Cherie Currie, lead guitarist Lita Ford, rhythm guitarist and singer Joan Jett, and drummer Sandy West, voted her in. Jackie Fused became Jackie Fox, and Fowley became her boss, her mentor, her provider. Jackie called her mom, Ronnie, with the good news. "But you don't know how to play bass," Ronnie protested. Jackie's father was just as confused. Their skepticism faded after Fowley met with Ronnie at her home and explained his plans for Jackie and the band. How they would always have a bodyguard, a social worker, and tutors with them. He stayed up with her until 2 in the morning, wheedling, counter-arguing, soothing. When he finally left, Ronnie had been worn down. "At that point, I would have signed a contract for both my kids to be slaughtered in front of me," Ronnie wrote her own parents immediately afterward. Kim Fowley's childhood was a difficult one. He said that he had polio and was raised in foster care. After a stint in a gang and then in the military, he discovered the music industry and studied it obsessively, longing to break in. He prided himself on working harder than everyone else. With characteristic indelicacy, he said he tried to do business on a Jewish level. There was always a next scheme, a new angle. He befriended studio engineers and the label Veeps, dialing A&R guys in London and never forgetting the name and complete discography of anyone even tangibly related to the industry. A little bit about how he started in 1960 and then continued on for 50 years. He died from bladder cancer in January 2015. "Of all the guys I know, Fowley was married to rock and roll," explains Chris Darrow, a musician who played on hundreds of records, including many of Fowley's. He was on duty 24 hours a day. Fowley had a phrase to describe his work, doing the hustle, and he applied it to all aspects of his life. He was sex-obsessed. It was a subject never far from his mind, a constant part of his patter. In the 70s, on a combination of beer and quaaludes, you could take on a room full of lesbians and tear them apart, he was quoted as saying in the biography Queens of Noise, the real story of the Runaways. As he would admit to anyone, Fowley was mostly after teenage girls, or in his words, young cunt, or dirty pussy. In the June 1975 issue of Backdoor Man, an influential LA zine, he spelled out his desires in a personal ad that included a cheesy photo of him in a white sport coat and white pants. It began, "If you are 18 and like it, or if you are under 18 and legally emancipated with paperwork, then you may have just stumbled upon the opportunity of a lifetime." The ad, which received 0 responses, was an aberration. Fowley was rarely so passive in his pursuits. Steve Tesh, a guitarist who worked with him on numerous projects and considered him a close friend, says they used to drive to high schools looking for teenage girls to hit on. Westlake was a gold mine because these girls came from wealthy families, he recalls. "We'd all be arrested today." As Fowley himself put it in Queens of Noise, describing his taste for vulnerable women, "I'm like a shark. I'll smell the blood." The musicians and journalists who formed Fowley's inner circle back then wanted to see his menace as an act, a test to weed out the weak. But some of his behavior was simply too violent to dismiss. In September 1975, Audrey Pavia, who had just turned 18, ended up backstage at an early Runaways show when the band was just a trio. Without warning, Fowley ran at her from across the room. "He threw me up against the wall, and he put his arm across my neck," Pavia remembers. "Then he hammered his knee between my legs. Fowley lifted her up off the ground and licked her face. He bit and sucked on her ear. She says she struggled to get away, but he pinned her to the wall for 5 minutes, telling her all the things he was going to do to her. I was terrified. I was embarrassed," Pavia says. "This is the part that's most embarrassing for me. I was a virgin. This was the most physical contact I'd had with a man. Afterwards, she noticed that her hair was matted with his spit." Fowley could also come on slow, courting and grooming unsuspecting girls. In early 1975, he became enamored of Cherie Currie, a 13-year-old aspiring songwriter he'd met at Alice Cooper's birthday party. She was his type, a young girl who spent too much time dodging her violent stepdad and bouncing from apartment to apartment in various working-class neighborhoods. She sought refuge in the glam rock scene, where her bisexuality was welcomed, and filled notebooks with songs that chronicled her experiences. It wasn't a hobby, she explains. I needed it like I needed it to breathe. Soon, Fowley began calling her at night, instructing her to tell her mother that the calls were merely about business. They'd talk about music for hours. Sometimes he'd play her a 45 over the phone and ask her what she thought about it. He told her she had good taste. He insisted that they meet without her mother knowing. At a park near her home in Long Beach, Fowley brought Chrome presents, including an Art Deco copper choker and a stack of the hippest 45s, magazines, and t-shirts. It seemed to Chrome that he had done this before. On her 14th birthday, Chrome's mother took her to Fowley's lawyer's office so she could sign a contract. Chrome would write songs for Fowley in return for $100 a month. She more than earned the money. It was Chrome who discovered Joan Jett and convinced Fowley to start a band with her. She says he didn't see Jett's potential at first. In a way, Fowley was the most responsible adult in her world. She needed him to believe in her, and he kept taking advantage of that. Months before Jackie joined the band, Chrome and all the Runaways at the time crashed at the Dog Palace. Once everyone went to sleep, Chrome says, Fowley walked into the living room and shook her awake. Before she could make a sound, he put a finger to his lips, shushing her. Then he grabbed her by the ankle and pulled her into the bedroom. When Chrome asked what was going on, he said something like, "It's time for dog worship," and told her that if she didn't give in to his sexual demands, she'd have to go back to Long Beach. Chrome thought about leaving, calling someone for a ride. But her family was poor and didn't have a telephone. She had nowhere to go. That night, Fowley masturbated on her. I didn't know how to say, "I don't want you to do this," Chrome says. I did not have that voice. I was also scared of him. He could be really scary. Fowley sexually assaulted her several other times, Chrome says. In his mind, he thought he was having a relationship with me, like a romantic relationship, she says. He didn't care what I thought about it. He just decided. So many people in the industry knew what Fowley was like, what he was capable of. But he had just enough clout to convince the naive and the desperate that he could make them stars. It was too risky to cross him. Chrome remembers waking up after the incident and trying to talk to Jett and West. And there's a little note about how Sandy West passed away in 2006 after, the lung cancer. So, quote from Chrome, I told them he's abusing me. I'm powerless and I don't know what to do, Chrome says. They just looked at me blankly like I was the idiot. I remember getting really mad and saying, you know what? Watch your ass, because you might be next. The final weeks of 1975 were madness for Jackie. She joined the Runaways, turned 16, and set out to learn the bass, all while attending class and preparing for her high school equivalency tests. She also felt as if she had to win over the other band members, a bookworm among rockers in glitter shorts and leather. Rehearsals in the grungy Studio City trailer space could be tense and sometimes brutal affairs depending on Fowley's mood. During one of Jackie's early practices, Fowley threw a microphone stand at the girls. Come on, you dog cunts, play this piece of shit, he screamed. All the hard work was leading up to the Runaways' New Year's Eve show at a tiny club in Orange County called Wildman Sam's. Jim Caron, who owned Wildman Sam's, remembers being impressed with the band that night, but also feeling uneasy about how young they all were. Kim is not your regular, normal kind of guy, he recalls. It wasn't like I could go up to Kim and say, dude, what are you going to do with the girls now that they're done playing? Are you going to take them home? Do they sleep in the studio? Do you keep them in a cage? He obviously had a lot of control over them. After the final set at around 1 a.m., Fowley took the band to a drab motel near the club where they started celebrating with friends. Jackie had thought of herself at the time as only a provisional member of the Runaways. Getting through the marathon show felt like a triumph. She'd seen so many kids her own age in the audience staring up at her. It was an amazing feeling, she says. It was empowering. It was also short-lived. Soon after Jackie arrived at the motel, a grown man she thinks was a roadie approached her with a Quaalude in his hand. He told her she needed to take it, no questions asked, and she did. Another party-goer, Brent Williams, a friend of Chrome's, says he heard people, not members of the band, talking about the number of Quaaludes Jackie was being given that night. 4, 5, even 6 pills. It was a date rape type situation, he says. And Jackie goes on a little bit about this in the TV interview.
We went back to a motel that Kim said he had gotten for us so we didn't have to drive home on New Year's Eve. and we were celebrating. The first personal memory that I have of that night is sitting in a chair and a roadie coming over to me and giving me a Quaalude. And one of the questions Mike asked me when I first saw him was, "Did you take this voluntarily?" And I couldn't answer the question. You know, I know that I put it in my mouth and swallowed, but it felt like a lie to say yes, and I didn't really understand why. And it has come out since through another witness that people in the room were bragging about how much of a drug they were giving me. So I don't know if that was the first one I took and I did it under pressure, whether I had been slipped a drink I just don't know.
Jackie has never before publicly discussed what happened next once the drugs took hold, but it has changed the course of her life. Most of the people at the party were teenagers, and they were spread out into different rooms. They smoked cigarettes and passed around beers. Jet played guitar with Williams. Chrome smoked a joint with a guy outside. Lita Ford was the one band member who said she wasn't there, and witnesses say the same. When Helen Rossler and Trudy Argulis, two of Jackie's friends from the Sunset music scene, showed up, they couldn't believe the state she was in. They had known her for a year, and never once had they seen her intoxicated. It didn't seem okay, Rossler says. Jackie was always really in control. At some point, Jackie says she had to lie down on a bed to rest. She was having trouble staying upright. When a roadie checked to see if she was okay, Fowley asked him if he was interested in having sex with her. "She doesn't mind," Fowley said. "Do you?" Jackie tried to protest, but she was frozen. "You don't know what terror is until you realize something bad is about to happen and you can't move a muscle," she says. "I can't move, I can't speak. All I can do is look him in the eye and do the best I can to communicate. Please say no. I don't know what it looked like from the outside, but I know what was going on inside, and it was horror." The roadie declined Fowley's offer, and soon after, Jackie says she started to slip in and out of consciousness. According to Rossler, Fowley stood over Jackie and began to unbutton her blouse. Nobody seemed to really care, Rossler says. It was really weird. Everybody was standing in there alone with themselves. It felt like everyone was detached or trying to pretend like nothing was going on. But Rossler couldn't stop staring at Fowley. She hoped he would notice her mute pleading, the rage in her eyes. "I remember really clearly just staring at him like, if only I stare at him hard enough, it'll make all this stop," Rossler says. "If only I stare at him and he looks at me, he'll go, 'Oh my God, what am I doing?'" When Fowley started taking Jackie's pants off, Rossler couldn't bear it anymore. She got in her parents' car and left. Around this time, Williams stumbled into the room. Multiple witnesses say that Fowley began to penetrate Jackie with the handle of a hairbrush. "It was one of those times you feel there's a spotlight on you," Williams says. "Everybody's looking at you to see how you would respond. You just want to get out of there." And soon enough, he did. Fowley invited other guys to have sex with Jackie before removing his own pants and climbing on top of her. "Kim's fucking someone," a voice shouted from the door of the motel room to the partygoers outside, calling them in to watch. Argulis returned to the room to see if this was all a big joke. On the bed, Fowley played to the crowd, gnashing his teeth and growling like a dog as he raped Jackie. He got up at one point to strut around the room before returning to Jackie's body. "I remember opening my eyes. Kim Fowley was raping me, and there were people watching me," Jackie says. She looked out from the bed and noticed Currie and Jet staring at her. She says this was her last memory of the night. Jet, through a representative, denied witnessing the event as it has been described here by multiple witnesses. Her representative referred all further questions to Jackie as it's a matter involving her and she can speak for herself. Currie claims that she spoke up and stormed out of the room. All witnesses say they felt intimidated. It turned into this really disgusting Grand Guignol-like theater performance that he put on, Chrome says. And Jackie was dead drunk, like corpse drunk. She was just lying down on her back, sound asleep, out of it. Chrome says Fowley picked up Jackie's arm, and it flopped down like a marionette. He had to manually move her body into positions that he wanted for himself. Chrome escaped to the adjoining room and began drinking. She was confused why nobody did anything to end the attack. She recalls that Jet and Currie were sitting off to the side of the room for part of the time, snickering. "I didn't know what to do," she says. "Like, what was I going to do? Go outside and drive and find a payphone and call the police? I didn't want to call the police on anyone, but at the same time I knew what was happening was wrong. Chrome was 14. Jackie showed up at the next band practice some days later, not ready to stop being a runaway. Although she was nervous about how her bandmates would treat her, she at least expected them to acknowledge that something bad had happened. But the girls hardly registered her presence. They just plugged in and started running through their songs. That was the day, Jackie says, the elephant joined the band. Jackie took her bandmate's silence to mean that she should keep quiet too. I didn't know if anybody would have backed me, she says. I knew I would be treated horribly by the police, that I was going to be the one that ended up on trial more than Kim. I carried this sense of shame and of thinking it was somehow my fault for decades. Currie says the girls, who then were all 16 and 17, never talked about how to handle the rape. There was no decision or strategy. The unspoken rule was simply, you forget it and you move on, Currie explains. I pushed it out of my mind the best I could. Jackie tried to do the same. She didn't tell her parents what had happened. She did tell her sister Carol, who was just 13 at the time. Carol believes that Jackie compartmentalized the rape so she could stay in the band. The demands of the job were relentless. While the girls yearned to be taken seriously as musicians, Fowley insisted on selling them as hard rock jailbait. He played up the youth angle every chance he got, recognizing that rebellious young women were craving self-expression and that male audiences found bad girl fantasies appealing. Lusting after young girls simply wasn't as taboo back then. This was an era when ZZ Top could sing about my angelic teenage queen, or when a Virgin Islands ad campaign dared you to try a virgin. On the back of the Runaways' debut album in 1976, Fowley listed each girl's age next to her photo. The mistrust between Jackie and everyone else associated with the Runaways made her quick-tempered and guarded. On long car rides between tour dates, Jackie refused to sleep, fearing that their driver would pass out. She made sure to stay sober on tour and complained when their manager, Scott Anderson, spent food money on drugs for the band. At a stop in Cleveland, Jackie vented to her family in a letter home. I'm not at all sure I will last through this tour, what with the screaming, yelling, and stupidity. The others, especially Ford, thought of Jackie as a charity case they were forced to hire, someone whose bass skills didn't compensate for all the whining she did. Currie now believes that Fowley was manipulating the girls into hating one another. We didn't have anybody, a woman or anyone, to keep us from talking or for us to be able to discuss things that were bothering us if we felt that there was cruelty between the bandmates, she says. And then there's another little footnote that says, Currie found another way to shield herself from Fowley, beginning a relationship with Anderson. I believed in a way that I was protecting myself because he wouldn't let something like the assault on Jackie happen if I'm with him. Instead, Anderson got her pregnant, and Currie had an abortion while the rest of the Runaways were recording their second album. Jackie talks a little bit about this in the interview as well.
Our day-to-day manager who had a long-term affair with Cherie Currie. I walked into rehearsal one day, and as soon as I walked in, Kim looked up at me and said, "Did you fuck so-and-so?" And I said, "Hell no," and there was a moment of dead quiet, and he said, "Well, you're the only one that didn't." And I was so shocked by this, I went and verified it with the other members of the band because I couldn't believe that it was true, and they all confirmed it. So the environment that we were in was obviously not a healthy one for young girls, and I think that we were just, I don't know, we were damaged. Let's put it that way.
And honestly, I don't know why statutory rape isn't being brought up. Like, even if they were consenting, none of these girls were safe at the age they were. None of them. Jackie's worrying and attempts at control made her stand out. Jackie was very different from the other girls, explains Kent Smith, a roadie for the band. She had a mouth on her. Against the protestations of their booking agent, she tried to read and approve contracts for live shows. When Fowley wanted the girls to wear identical Runaways t-shirts with their names on them, as if they were a sports team or the female Ramones, Jackie objected. She thought the band deserved better. One time she says she went so far as to try to depose Fowley. She spent her own money to fly to New York, where she recruited Kiss's manager to take over and Aerosmith's producer to work on their next album. The coup attempt elicited nothing more than a shrug from the other girls. What got to me was the band's apathy towards everything, she says. You couldn't get them interested in their own well-being. By the spring of 1977, Jackie told Jet that she'd had enough, but she says Jet got on her knees and begged her to stay, and a few weeks later they set off on an extended tour through Japan, where they were legitimate stars. Hundreds of fans greeted the Runaways at the airport, and their days were filled with photo shoots and TV appearances. At their sold-out shows, Jackie was shocked to see as many women as men in the crowd, including a large number of teenage girls. At their sold-out shows, Jackie was shocked to see as many women as men in the crowd, including a large number of teenage girls. It was nice to have audiences that weren't there primarily for the titillation factor, Jackie says. After the tour, fans sent her letters saying how inspired they were. I think I want to be a rock musician like you, one girl wrote. I will find my own way. But dysfunction travels. During the soundcheck for one of the last shows in Japan, Jackie noticed that the stand she'd been given wasn't strong enough to hold her white 1965 Gibson Thunderbird, and alerted the crew. She treasured the instrument. It felt like one of the few things from her music career that was hers alone. It also cost $1,600. When she rushed off stage after the main set, she found that the crew had blown off her request for a new stand. And when she went back out for the encore, a roadie handed her a different bass, saying that the Thunderbird had gone out of tune. Jackie didn't think much of it until the ride back to the hotel. The band and crew were acting weird around her, quiet and conspiratorial. It was a familiar feeling. Later in the evening, Smith came by her room and told her that her beloved Thunderbird had fallen off the stand. Its head had snapped off. When Smith left, Jackie fell apart. She felt alone, like nobody gave a shit. She picked up a Coke bottle and whipped it against the wall, shattering it into pieces. She took one of the bigger shards and ran it down 4 inches of her forearm. Then my anger was spent, she says. I dropped the glass. With Currie's help, she made it to the hospital, where her arm was bandaged and she was given a sedative. Jackie checked in at some press events for the Runaways after that, but she realized what needed to be done. She called her mom and said, "Get me out of here." In no time, an envelope was waiting for her at the hotel's front desk, containing a bus ticket to the Tokyo airport. If she wants to go home, let her go home, Fowley told Smith. And this is where I don't fault Joan Jett for being in the room and not saying anything, allegedly. I fault her for this. Shortly after Jackie returned to Los Angeles and the stories of her quitting the band hit the news, Brent Williams, who witnessed what happened to her the previous New Year's, says he received a call from Jet. She said that Jackie's parents might file a lawsuit. If lawyers ever contacted him, he needed to deny being in the motel room that night. Jet's representative did not comment when asked about the phone call. This was part of a pattern, Williams says. A day or two after the rape, Fowley made sure Williams attended a party of his in Hermosa Beach. There, Fowley warned him not to talk about what he'd seen. Fowley then asked Williams to pick up a guitar and gave him a on-the-spot songwriting lesson. So, maybe Fowley told Joan to do that. I don't know. He probably did. Fowley always denied any sexual impropriety with members of the Runaways, including in a 2013 band biography. They can talk about it until the cows come home, but in my mind, I didn't make love to anybody in the Runaways, nor did they make love to me. Victory Tischler Blue was Jackie's replacement on bass, and one of her main memories from her time as a Runaway was how some of the other band members made fun of what happened to Jackie. I heard about that non-stop, she says now. They would talk about Kim fucking Jackie like a dog. It was kind of a running joke. Oftentimes during sound checks, Tischler Blue says that Smith would play his secret recording of Jackie's breakdown in Japan. He made listening to it part of the band's pre-show ritual. He was taunting her and she started screaming, "I'm sick of being sick," Tischler Blue remembers. It became a catchphrase with the band. She was shrieking it. It shook me to my core, and everybody would laugh. So, if the adults were the one instigating that shit, I kind of understand, being a teenager and laughing at it, but, holy shit. And there's a few paragraphs just about what she did after quitting the band. She enrolled at UCLA in her mid-20s. In 1988, she graduated and then went on to study at Harvard Law School. Jackie's trauma intensified after learning in 2000 that Currie wanted to write about the rape for a memoir. Currie depicted the incident in lurid detail, but instead of Jackie, the victim was a fictionalized groupie who encouraged her rapist. Jackie was merely a bystander, and an indifferent one at that. Jackie threatened legal action over this account, at which point Currie collected affidavits from 2 witnesses. The publisher ultimately decided to pull the book, and Jackie continued to stay silent about what happened to her. She wasn't ready to come out as the true victim. There's another little footnote saying 11 years later another publisher released a book containing Currie's account. It doesn't mention Jackie in relation to the rape. I used to have a copy of Cherie's book, and I really wish I still owned it. If I still had it, I would probably use it as a reference here. But Jackie talks about Cherie's account a little bit too, so insert clip.
Now, let me ask you, back in 2000, you wrote a blog, Jackie, in which you said you never knew about Kim Fowley, that he had ever provided drugs to anyone, and you've also had quotes saying that you were not the subject of that rumor that had dogged the band about a rape occurring with people being witness to this rape. So I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about, and it's sort of in the same vein of what we've been discussing here, because you weren't seeing this as a rape for so many years. But can you explain to me why you would make comments like that? Because I think a lot of people do make comments like that along the way.
This was in the context of, I found out that Cherie was devoting a chapter in a book she planned to publish on my rape. She didn't identify me, but she initially had me in there as a bystander, and not just a passive bystander, but one who was watching this unfold and saying, "Are there any more burgers? I'm still hungry." And I took issue with that because at the time I didn't know, well, first of all, I wasn't there witnessing this rape. I was unconscious experiencing it. I did, though, think that the worst thing you could be accused of was standing by watching someone get raped and not intervening. I've obviously since learned that it's not the worst thing in the world. There are a lot of reasons for it. So, and the account was, it wasn't fact-checked. It was just one person's viewpoint, and it was not like the Huffington Post story where Jason, the writer, interviewed everybody who was present. And there were some inaccuracies, in particular, the part saying that I had encouraged Kim. And so I felt like I never wanted to be identified as that person that she had written about. And I denied the event because I didn't recognize that the event was at all true. Now, I have since learned that that some of those details were accurate, but I still don't remember them. I only know that account was in some respects accurate because other people have verified it. And I just didn't want to say, yeah, that was me, the girl that was fucked up out of her mind and encouraging this, and yes, putting on a sex show. And so I denied it very carefully, saying that I was not a witness to what she had written, which is technically accurate anyway. I didn't witness it. I was unconscious for a lot of it. And I didn't know that Kim had drugged me. So I was honestly saying I never saw Kim drug anyone. And I still can say I never saw Kim drug anyone because I only know he did it again through other witness statements. But I will say it's really, I know this was traumatic for the people that witnessed it, but being outed was awful, and there was a threat to out me. And I did that blog post very quickly to try to get out ahead of that threat. And, you never think that that's something that you write quickly and from where you are in the place is going to come back and be used in this context. But I did write that, and that's why.
The feelings of shame that I had felt before were now doublefold, Jackie says. Her guard only started to come down after reading Chrome's comments about the rape in a Runaways biography published 2 summers ago. Chrome didn't mention Jackie by name, but she didn't need to. Chrome's account perfectly matched her memory. This was a revelation. Jackie no longer wanted to push the rape as far out of her mind as possible. She wanted to know everything about it. Who else was in the room? Did they feel guilty about not intervening? Would she, in turn, feel guilty about that? Jackie knew what she needed to do. She set about trying to track down Fowley. In the few times that Jackie had spoken to him on the phone years earlier, he would begin the conversation by asking if she was taping the call. Now, sick with bladder cancer, he brushed off her emails, and the number she had for him was disconnected. Inspired by a lawsuit filed against Cosby by one of his alleged victims, she met with an attorney. She says she didn't want money from Fowley, she just thought she might be able to scare him into a meeting. She craved an acknowledgement that what Fowley did was wrong, an apology, and if she didn't get it, she knew precisely what to do. I could have looked at him and said, "Don't kid yourself that you're dying in a state of grace. You're going to die knowing you are not forgiven." She never got that moment. Fowley died in mid-January, and the New York Times hailed him as a muse and talent scout of disposable art, a rogue conscience at the ground level of West Coast pop culture. The obits, testimonials, and tear-stained tweets, including some from her former bandmates, nauseated Jackie, but she didn't dwell on her anger for long. By then, Jackie had read up on a concept called the bystander effect, which seeks to explain why people who witness a crime often don't do anything to stop it. The study of this phenomenon dates back to 1964, when Kitty Genovese, a New York City bar manager, was stabbed to death while her neighbors allegedly ignored her cries. 2 social psychologists who examined the case, Bibb Latané and John Darley, observed that a violent crime doesn't happen in slow motion. The perpetrator doesn't have the decency to ask the crowd, "So how do you feel about this?" It's a witness's job to decode the situation quickly, to tell if this is a violent act or something else. As a result, bystanders don't experience one dominant emotion. There's anger, fear, worry for the victim, worry for themselves. It only gets more confusing when other bystanders are nearby. The more witnesses there are, the less likely it is that one of them will act. Latané and Darley call this diffusion of responsibility. Add in prevalent myths about rape, and the situation becomes even more complicated. A 2014 study found that witnesses were less likely to intervene in cases of assault than iPod theft. Jackie found herself becoming more understanding of the other people in the room. In December, she messaged Chrome on Facebook. "We should talk one of these days. I think we have a lot to discuss." Jackie made sure not to make the topic of conversation explicit. She knew that once she mentioned the rape in writing, she could never again pretend it didn't happen. Chrome replied with her number in an XO. When Jackie finally called over a month later, it was only under the pretense of arranging a meeting, but they clicked instantly. Chrome ended up telling Jackie everything she remembered from the night of the rape, and then explained how her own life began to unravel soon after. In subsequent calls, Chrome talked about how she dropped out of high school and became a full-blown addict, a real runaway. It took her years to get sober. "I know that Jackie had a lot of pain," Chrome says. "I was glad to be able to tell her that you're not crazy. It did happen. I just wanted her to know it was okay." And then the writer interviews Chrome for a bit. "Chrome took me into her living room, still packed high with boxes, and explained that she had spent the last 40 years writing lyrics she never showed anybody. In the immediate aftermath of Jackie's rape, she couldn't shake the idea that Fowley never believed in her talent, that he only wanted to sleep with her." Again, relatable. She ended up abandoning her dreams of becoming a successful songwriter. "I can't blame Kim for my mistakes that I made in life," Chrome said, "but I know that incident really had an effect on me." Only now is she growing more comfortable with the idea of sharing her work with others. Talks about how she talked to her mom about it, how Jackie talked to her mom about the rape for the first time. And then it says, Carol worried that her sister's new openness was re-traumatizing. Sure, Jackie had done well as a lawyer, she's currently in between jobs, and amassed many friends over the years, but there were too many days when Jackie was alone in her house replaying it all. Had she been targeted? How many pills was she fed? How many people were in the room? How could anyone have believed it was anything but rape? It was exhausting. And then there's another little footnote that says, one witness told Jackie that she looked not in distress during the rape. That was probably due to the Quaaludes. Dr. Yingvid Yngvild Olsen, probably not pronouncing that right, an addiction specialist in Baltimore, says that someone under the influence of the drug might appear as if they are having a good time, but in reality, that's not necessarily the whole picture. Still, Jackie thought it was important to continue her detective work. She tracked down Rossler, who she discovered was also at the motel. Their friendship had been forged at Hollywood rock shows and on long bus rides to each other's houses, but they hadn't spoken since the incident. I feel like I've been waiting all this time to see her again, Rossler says. I never stopped thinking about the rape. Never. Rossler says what she saw in that room that night made her determined to become the anti-Jackie. She cut her arms and wrists and burned cigarettes into her hands. Friends gave her the nickname Helen Killer. I preferred Dangerous, she says. It was safer to me. I will do shit that you don't even want to know. If I'm going to fuck myself up this bad, what can you do? That's sad. Well, it's all pretty fucking sad. Sometimes Jackie wonders how her life, not to mention Chrome's and Rossler's, would have been different had she never met Fowley, or if she'd found a ride home after the New Year's Eve show. But she tries not to dwell. She says she's more interested in restoring what's been lost. One of the things I've tried to do with every bystander is let them know it's not their fault, she says. I also have to not blame myself for what happened to them. We are all victims of what Kim did. Alright, so second part of the video. This is the part where I'm going to struggle a bit because I didn't script it. So when this article initially came out, Cherie kind of had a public meltdown on her Facebook page. I truly can't recall. I don't think it was all on the same day. I think it was over the course of like a few days. But she said some stuff that like really started to bother me, and I ended up responding, and she ended up responding to me, and it was like a whole thing, and I've never really talked about it publicly before, but we're gonna get into it. Shout out to And Now the Runaways on Tumblr, because if it was not for them, I would not have these receipts. I'm not able to black out people's names, because some of like, there were some Facebook moms or whatever that like kind of jumped on me too, and I won't be able to black out their names, so I'm going to partially screen record my computer and partially read off my phone. And if it has someone's name, I won't enlarge it. Like, enlarge the screen cap. Also, Tumblr is kind of glitchy, so like this first photo doesn't come up. Like, I don't know what that's about, so I don't know. But yeah, we're going to work with what we've got. So this first screen cap, all I can say is if Joan, Sandy, and I saw an unconscious girl being brutally raped in front of us, we would have hit him over the head with a chair. The second one says, the best advice I can give is don't wait 40 years or after they're dead to confront your abuser. If you are being abused, do it now. There is no better feeling than to look them in the eye like I did. That is courage. I love you all. And then this one says, I have been accused of a crime, of looking into the dead yet pleading eyes of a girl unable to move while she was being brutally raped and doing nothing. I have never been one to deny my mistakes in life, and I wouldn't start now. If I were guilty, I would admit it. There are so many excuses I could make being only 1 month into my 16th year at the time that people would understand, but I am innocent. When I return from Sweden, I will seek a qualified polygraph examiner to put to rest any and all allegations. I will make public the questions, answers, and results of that test. I am a proud person, but for this I may need to open a GoFundMe account since I do not know how much this will cost. I am not a rich person, but a carver. I wouldn't ask for funding for my new album because I am proud. I will prove I am telling the truth. I will not allow anyone to throw me under the bus and accuse me of such a foul act. I will fight for myself. It is the only thing I can do, and I am glad to do it. So there's a lot. Like I said, I don't remember if she posted all of these the same day or what, but we're gonna get into my response. I don't remember which one of these. Oh wait, there's one more. Because Chrissy Hind, oh my god, I'm gonna be such a fucking, people are gonna come for me because I mispronounced her name. Because Chrissy Hind came out with her own statement and oh, that one doesn't come up either. Okay, I'll just bring it up on my phone then. I stand with Chrissy Hind. She is taking a lot of flack for her statements. Who are any of you to say that her personal healing isn't acceptable to you? Being a complete victim in cases like hers removes all her personal power. Taking some responsibility in some cases gives that power back to you. I, for one, had to take responsibility for getting into the car of my kidnapper/rapist. It was stupid. I didn't know this person even though he tried to make me believe I did. I knew better, but I didn't listen to that inner voice. Leave Chrissy Hind alone and take something from her message. That message is, don't put yourself into situations that are dangerous. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that this world is full of danger and predators. Protect yourself. Are any of you aware that those that immerse themselves in complete and utter victimhood are more likely to commit suicide? Don't take away people's power to cope in whichever way they choose fit. Jackie Fuse is no hero to me, but blaming everyone but herself? It's bullshit. Good for you, Chrissy, and I look forward to your book. You are a stand-up gal. Hi, Editing Bree here. So, I realized I did not bother stating what Chrissy had actually said because, it was Cherie that I disagreed with, not Chrissy necessarily. The headline, was Chrissy Hind says it was her own fault she was sexually assaulted. And like, if that's how she handles that, that's fine. I don't recall if that specific statement of Chrissy's was in response to Jackie's coming out about Kim Fowley. However, I was disagreeing with Cherie because to my knowledge it was Cherie who was making it about Jackie. I just can't help but wonder if Cherie has the same opinions about the other people coming out about Fowley as she does about Jackie. You know? And it also just felt like she didn't even read the fucking article. Like, actually read it. Or the TV interview. It's like, it seems like people told her about it, or she heard about it through some third party and freaked out and assumed everything. So, yeah. Back to the video. So, like, Jackie was not accusing Cherie of a crime, nor was she blaming Cherie, or Sandy, or Joan, or anyone. Whether I am or not, or the writer of the article is a different story, I guess, but, like, Jackie herself, in the TV thing, said this.
What is, you wrote something on Facebook about it that like kind of surprised me, and I just want to read this and then ask you to sort of go a little bit further and respond what I characterize as a somewhat generous response to people that watched you be raped. So this is what you wrote. I know some people watching the online drama unfold have been discouraged by the lack of support I've received from my former bandmates, to which I can only say that I hope you never have to walk in their shoes. My rape was traumatic for everyone, not just me, and everyone deals with trauma in their own way and time. It took exceptional courage for many of the witnesses to talk frankly about how they felt. Most have apologized to me for their inaction that night, apologies that have been unnecessary, although welcome. Do you hold your bandmates responsible in any way for their inaction? And what do you have to say for other people that might have witnessed something like this or might witness something, or an assault like this in the future? How do you have any advice?
Well, first of all, I want to say under the law, they did not commit a crime and they did nothing legally wrong. It is so hard to know how you're going to react when you're in that situation. You might not know when that line has been crossed. It might not be clear exactly what's going on at first. Even once you realize what something is going on, we don't teach people what to do. And people might be afraid to confront the person who's doing it directly, either out of fear for their safety in that moment or for later retaliation. And then you add youth and possibly drugs and alcohol to that mix, the fact that there were other adults in the room who they might have been looking to for some kind of guidance. And then there's something called diffusion of responsibility. And studies have shown that the more people that witness a crime, the less likely those bystanders are to do anything to intervene. So it means possibly if I had been raped in front of 2 people or 3 people, they would have acted. But because there were close to a dozen people in the room at the time, I think they were just looking at each other and not knowing what to do. And there's an interview that's on the internet that Cherie gave in sometime in the 80s, and they asked her how she felt, and she said that, you know, she protested and stood up to leave, and Kim made her stay. But then after that, she just tried to look cool, because that's what people were doing.
You heard what we were talking about before, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Let me start with something that sounds horrendous. After you joined the Runaways, you were subjected to a kind of a sex show. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Excuse me. About 3 to 4 weeks after I joined the band.
And how old were you?
I was 15 years old.
Okay.
A person in authority had all the band members sit in a hotel room. That we were really in San Diego doing a show, and forced us to watch him engage in sex with a young girl. Now, I think that he felt that he was breaking us into the rock and roll.
The realities of the road, huh?
Exactly, right. And
how did you feel?
I wanted to leave, and I got up and he went, "Down, dog," like one of the...
Are you serious?
I'm telling you, that was the kind of brutality that I experienced.
Were you frightened, or did you pretend that you were really cool?
I pretended I was cool, but I was frightened. I did finally just get up and leave.
And that's what people do. It's really, really difficult. So I'm not an apologist, but I am really trying to be compassionate, because I don't think it was easy for them.
It's like, because Cherie goes on to talk about the TV interview, but it's like she didn't even watch it. I don't remember which one of these posts I was commenting on. I think it might have been the Chrissy Hyde one, because of what she specifically said about Jackie, and like other things I saw her saying over the course of the things leading up to this post. There's no timestamp or date for the Huffington Post article. However, the TV interview happened in July 2015, and through checking in now the Runaways Tumblr archives, I was able to find that these Facebook posts happened sometime in September. So that would have made me about 17 years old. So I don't know how well I articulated myself for like a 17-year-old, so just keep that in mind. So I said, "Cherie, this breaks my heart because I used to genuinely look up to you as a survivor of sexual assault and someone who made me feel empowered, but I just don't feel like I can anymore. If someone wants to take the blame for their own rape, that is their business and their business alone. Each and every situation is so wildly different. You were not accused of any wrongdoing in Jackie's statements, just because she mentioned that neither you nor anyone else did anything. Because she's fully aware of the fact that it wasn't anyone's fault other than Fowley's, and it broke my heart to see you refer to your own rape as more brutal than hers in one of your own comments here on Facebook. You can't put words in other survivors' mouths just because you've been hurt too. It's not fair." And then somebody responded to me, and they said, "You misunderstood Cherie's point entirely. Cherie was kidnapped and truly brutally raped, beaten by a deranged stranger. She's very lucky she lived. What Cherie has publicly stated for decades is that Fuse, yes, underage at 16, willingly participated in a sex show with Kim Fowley. Statutory rape from the wild rock and roll 70s in a different time and place. Apples and oranges, my dear." And I said, "I know what happened to Cherie. I'm aware that it was worse physically. That wasn't my point. Also, you can't be willing when you're on drugs. Jackie was going in and out of consciousness. The fact that it was less physically brutal doesn't make it any less traumatizing." And I think part of the confusion is going in and out of consciousness here means blacking out, not necessarily passing out. Like, I don't know if you've ever blacked out, but you can still do things while you're blacked out. Editing Bree here again. I was a bit shy to say this before, but now I don't give a fuck. The few times that I blacked out on alcohol, which I know isn't the same as Quaaludes, but it's still blacking out, so I figure there's still a comparison there. I was able to walk to and from somewhere, allegedly. And when I came to, I was laying down in a bed. It felt like I was opening my eyes, but I couldn't tell you if I was really asleep for a time or if my brain was just waking up, you know? And then I said, "And the drugs were even given to her without consent. Nothing about Jackie's situation was consensual or willing, and if that's genuinely what you think, I refuse to participate in any more conversation." And then Cherie herself actually responded. So Cherie said, what did Cherie say? Let's see. Jackie has changed her story, Brianna, that she was not forced to take drugs. She fabricated it. At least she is admitting that much. Which, I don't know when she fabricated anything. She always said that she put the Quaalude in her mouth.
And then, I mean, more importantly, or more to question that raises some questions. Your bandmate Cherie is now saying that you took the Quaaludes voluntarily, and that this bandmate has made a number of different contradictory statements about what actually occurred on that evening. And the latest is that Jackie took the Quaalude and was performing, putting on a sex show, and basically putting all of the blame for the alleged assault on Jackie's shoulders. So I'm going to give this question, first of all, to Mike Cavaluzzi about what actually transpired, as Jackie has told you, in terms of whether or not the drug use was with consent. We just heard what you had to say, and frankly, we're talking about a young woman who was unconscious while somebody was having sex with her. Even if she was in and out, that there were moments where she was completely unconscious and she doesn't even recall what has occurred. So under the law.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to make the distinction, first of all, whether or not the drugs were taken voluntarily. If drugs are taken involuntarily, then it is just rape, plain and simple, just as if you are forcing someone to have sex against their will, and that was the situation with Jackie. However, if the drugs were taken voluntarily by someone and it placed them in a mental state where they were not able to consciously give consent, that would still be considered rape. However, that's not the circumstance that Jackie has communicated, but even the example that Cherie Currie gives would still constitute rape.
She put one Quaalude in her mouth, and then other people were bragging about giving her more than one Quaalude without her consent. Other people in the room verified this. I am not comparing my kidnapping to Jackie's story. I never saw her in and out of consciousness, only an active participant who laughed at me when I stood up in protest. Again, like the difference between blacking out and passing out. It's different. I have sworn statements of others that saw what I saw and left when I did, because neither Jackie nor Kim cared that I was disturbed by this act. My problem with all of it is that Jackie claimed on national TV that she was unconscious and awoke to see me and Joan there doing nothing to stop this. That she was unable to move or speak, but could see us just fine. She said she was unable to move or speak before this happened, when Kim asked if the roadie wanted to fuck her. After that is when she blacked out, or started blacking out and then blacking in.
The next thing that I remember, I was lying on the bed in the room, propped up on pillows, and a roadie came over to ask me if I was okay. And then there was Kim standing behind him, and since we can use the language, I'm going to use the language he used. He said, "Do you want to fuck her?" And he said, "Look, it's okay. She won't mind, will you?" And I went to say no, and I discovered I couldn't speak, and I couldn't move, and all I could do was try to make eye contact with the roadie and try to mentally project my terror and the prayer that he would say no, which thank God he did. And I started to slip in and out of consciousness at that point. Other witnesses say that Kim violated me with the handle of a hairbrush, which I thankfully do not remember. And I may get really emotional during this part.
It's okay.
Man, I thought it was over.
Well, it's a horrible story to have to be telling. I mean, I feel bad asking you, but I want people to understand what you went through.
Right, it's getting easier, but I still get emotional about it. The next clear memory I have, Kim was on top of me, raping me, and I looked over his shoulder and saw a room full of people watching me, and the only people I can identify with any clarity are Joan Jett and Cherie Currie, and after that, I blacked out.
That lie she told cost me more than my new record. It cost me every ounce of caring that I had for her. She has cost me dearly with her lawsuits, her threats, but now her lies. I barely knew her, but I would have bashed him over the head with a chair had she just once said to stop instead of guiding him sexually. I'm done. Oh, I forgot to scroll. And then somebody quoted something that was really strange to me. They said, Brianna, what part of Eat Me Like a Wolf sounds unwilling and unconscious to you? And like, I read Cherie's book. I really wish I had it. However, I'm so puzzled by this. I'm sorry. Like, so they said, Brianna, what part of Eat Me Like a Wolf sounds unwilling and unconscious to you? And at the time, I did not even respond to this particular statement, because at this point I was like, I'm having a conversation with Cherie now. So you would figure that this is something like Cherie claimed Jackie to have said during the assault. And, like, again, I read Cherie's book. I remember reading about the sex show, and I don't remember seeing that quote. I feel like, and I remember being just as confused when the book, like, at this time when I was 17, when the book was more, like, fresh in my memory. I don't remember seeing that quote in Cherie's account of the assault, and so I'm just super puzzled. Like, okay, regardless of whether or not Jackie really said that, I don't really care. What I'm more disturbed by is I have not ever seen Cherie say that publicly. I did not remember seeing her say it publicly when all this stuff was more fresh in my memory. And so I'm really wondering what this random fan was doing with this quote. And, like, I can't help but imagine just, like, a group chat of Cherie and all these Facebook moms, like, talking shit about what happened. I don't know. Maybe that quote was in the book, but I don't fucking remember it. I remember being confused when I saw that comment. And then I said, responding to Cherie, I really wish I could get you to see the point of what I'm trying to say. I've seen you say a lot of this before, so I'm not exactly surprised. And once again, regardless of how conscious she may or may not have been, drugs that were given to her unwillingly. Having sex with someone in that state is rape, no matter the victim's behavior. And it is no one's fault but Kim Fowley's. I sincerely wish you healing, Cherie. And then the same person, this has been the same person for a while, but they said, oh my god, Brianna, how unwilling does it sound when Miss Fuse herself states on her crime time interview that she took the Quaalude, put it in her mouth, swallowed it, but somehow it didn't feel voluntary? Are you really that gullible? And again, I feel like her explanation covers that, but... And then I said, are you unaware that peer pressure is a thing and 15, 16-year-olds are generally vulnerable to it? Teenagers everywhere make stupid decisions. Adults know this, or should at least. If a teenager is intoxicated and begins acting inappropriately, the adult is the mature one and responsible for not responding inappropriately. If an adult decides to take advantage of a situation in a room full of children, it is not the children's fault. And notice, I used children, like, plural right there, as in it's not your fault either, Cherie. And here's where she really had a meltdown. So she said, alright, Brianna Carmel, when someone accuses you of a crime on national TV, watching a brutal rape, and ruins your life, then maybe you will understand my anger. Is lying okay with you? Is it fair? Not to me, it's not. I'll never forgive her ever for what she did. She destroyed my reputation as a decent human being, and it was all a lie. I would never ever let that happen to a girl. Even at 16, I would have stopped it. And then I said, same thing Jackie said, which is, it's not a crime to be a witness to a crime. And I think the fact that you seem to think it is says a lot. It wasn't anything Jackie said that caused me to think badly of you, that's all I have to say. I'm sincerely sorry about anything that's ruined your reputation, but there really isn't any blame on your shoulders at all, and you don't need to clear your name just because it was reported that you were there. You were a child too, and it's okay. And somebody else went off on me about how you're accountable even when you're a teenager on drugs. So, if you're traumatized by an adult taking advantage of you, tough shit. So, okay. God, I need another cigarette. You damn well are accountable even when you were on drugs, when you took the drugs yourself. She maybe took one herself, maybe, possibly, and then people gave her more. They might have slipped her more before. Jackie was doing her thing and was old enough to be accountable. No, she was not. She was not old enough to be accountable. She was 16 years old. The biggest shame is she pointed fingers at Cherie intentionally to cause her harm. She never pointed fingers at Cherie. She never did that. She never did that. So, fuck man, what's my point here? I need another cigarette.
Why now?
I think everybody comes to grips with what happened in their own time. And for me, part of it was that I didn't really remember these events well until I kind of opened the attic where I had stored them and pulled out that box, removed the mental crime scene tape that I had thrown over it and started thinking about it. And it really started with the publication of a book called Queens of Noise by Evelyn McDonnell, in which Cherie Currie, who was the band's co-founder and original songwriter, reported her version of what she had seen and how deeply it had affected her. And I started thinking about things from the point of view of the people who had witnessed it and how it might have been for them. And I started really looking at it, and some memories that I had buried started coming loose. And I realized that I had been directing all my anger about it toward the people who had stood by and watched and not done anything. And they're not the people I should have been angry at. I should have been angry at Kim Fowley, the man who raped me. And I finally put my anger there. And once my anger went there, I wanted to do something about it. And that's why I got referred to Mike.
A 16-year-old being slipped drugs is not the same as an adult taking drugs. She might have taken the one. She did not consent to taking 4, 5, or 6. And even then the one is questionable. Fuck, this shit makes me so mad. For that matter, someone having sex with you as a 16-year-old who has been slipped drugs is not the same as someone having sex with you as an adult who has consensually taken drugs and is experienced taking drugs. Jackie was not experienced taking drugs.
One of the things, and Jackie referred that I asked her the question of whether she had taken the Quaalude voluntarily. I do think that people have an image of young teenage girls on the Sunset Strip in a band, and in general in the 70s, and specifically about the Runaways, that they were very much a part of a drug culture, taking Quaaludes, drinking alcohol. And this has been true about Joan Jett and Cherie Currie. They have been open about their own history with drug use. I think people do need to know that that was not Jackie. Jackie was not a young girl who used drugs. She did not drink alcohol. The only band member that did throughout your history with the Runaways, am I correct, Jackie, that you did not take drugs or drink alcohol?
I drank occasionally. I tried drugs a few times. I really didn't like them. Drugs and I just don't get along. I mean, I'm lucky in that respect because things could have been a lot worse. And some of the witnesses to my rape started using drugs and drinking because of what they had seen. That was their trauma, and I'm just lucky that I don't have that gene.
She did not have the experience of an adult. She was 16. And Cherie, for that matter, did not have the experience of an adult, so it's understandable that she didn't do anything.
Expect it's what he's built for. There's a tiny galactus in each of us, and
Even Lita Ford's statement? Honestly, I was not there when this happened as Jackie says it did, so I really can't tell you much. When you do read my book, you'll see that I never really hung out with Joan or Cherie, and whatever went on between Joan and Cherie kind of stayed between Joan and Cherie. Scott Anderson, who was the manager along with Kim Fowley, Scott went on tour with us. So if anybody knew anything, it would have been Scott, Cherie, and Joan, and Scott has now passed away along with Kim Fowley. But I do know that Jackie's not a liar, and if she says that somebody was watching her, and if she says that this happened, then I believe her. I do. She's a little extreme sometimes, but still, it's not right. I really don't know what to say about it. I wasn't there and no one told me about it. This is the first I've heard of it. So like, if we're to believe what Vicky Blue says, those last two sentences simply aren't true. But I don't know. I think this goes deeper than a lot of them are willing to admit. But hey, at least Lita believes her, and will publicly say that she believes her. But yeah, in conclusion, I think it really sucks that none of those girls were safe. And Kim Fowley is a piece of shit. And everyone around them, all the adults around them, were just not good. And I think that environment kind of affected them all in their own way. And that's not their fault. But yeah, basically, I'm making this video for any new fans of the Runaways as a result of the new movie. Not new movie, but new to Netflix. I don't know. I just feel like this needs to be talked about if we're gonna talk about all the good stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we can't just pretend the bad stuff didn't happen. I just think it's really important to recognize that Kim Fowley's behavior was not okay. And I think the Runaways movie romanticizes his behavior a little bit. Or at the very least could lead to teenage girls romanticizing his behavior like it kind of did for me. Until I found out about the allegations, of course. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, a big thanks to the Tumblr blog and now the Runaways for helping me out with this, and I will see you in the next video, whatever that looks like. Thank you very much. Have a good one.